monies into education, and therefore they run in circles around the United States in terms of education. But it's all about what your priorities are, and, putting your money where your mouth is. So if you put so much money into building prisons and instruments of war, as opposed to investing in your people, that's what's going to happen. Those things are going to happen. So, there are different ways that can be addressed, sure. But it's about what really the priorities of the government.
It has been said that I have two alternatives: either go to jail or go to the army. But I would like to say that there is another alternative, and that alternative is justice.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Muhammad Ali has just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
He refused induction on the grounds of his religious convictions on war.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother or some poor hungry people in the mud for big powerful America and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger.
Muhammad Ali is really important in this because when Ali refuses induction, there's a famous column in the New York Times written by Tom Wicker where he just wonders out loud what would happen if you had 100,000 Muhammad Alis. You had 100,000 people who were prepared to do what Muhammad Ali just did. You would bring this war to a stop. So the draft resistors set that kind of as a goal.
It took an all-white jury less than a half hour to find Muhammad Ali guilty of all charges and specifications. He was sentenced to the maximum, 5 years in prison, and was fined $10,000.
No, I won't.
It's easier and it's more money in keeping people incarcerated, keeping them down. If we all are educated, then it's an even playing field. Why would they want an even playing field? Because if you're educated, he's educated, I'm educated, she's educated, now we're lobbying for their jobs. But if you keep us with a record and you can't lie for certain jobs, which is a form of racism, in my opinion, now you're not smart enough to figure out what's next, how to get out of this rut. You just keep doing the same rut. So if I don't give you more education, I don't have to worry about you. You're going to have one or two choices, and usually you end up in the prison choice. Like, you end up doing something dumb because you can't make it ends meet because you don't have the education to make ends meet. So what do? You go out and try to be slick, and you end up in jail. And it keeps the assembly line going, one after the next. We end up right back in there. So they don't want to educate us. Why would they?
It's actually a system to break the spirit. Like, that's really what it does, and that's what it's there for. It's not to reform. It's not to rehabilitate, which it should be, and it could be that, but it's not that. Our revolutionary leaders were killed. Pedro Albizu Campos, he was killed. He was an attorney. He went to Harvard. He was a freedom fighter for Puerto Rico, and he was incarcerated and riddled with cancer, radiation, and basically taken away from the fight. But he was exposing what Puerto Rico was suffering years ago. And here we are today, and now it's all being revealed. But there's still so much change to go. So the way that they broke down Pedro Albizu Campos is the way that they break down our people every single day. It's happening right now. There are innocent people in jail right now, and they are being abused. They are under inhumane conditions, and it's all part of the system. It's all part of the system to break the spirit and to steal our freedom, and or even promote fight for freedom. The will is to break the will of the people, but that's not going to happen. It's not happening. And I think that if we all stood up, we would make a huge difference, a huge impact in this change. Now is really the time.
Just speaking on the whole prison system and just myself being a formerly incarcerated guy, I'm still trying to understand what prison reform is. Like, what does that entail? Like, what is prison reform? What are you doing that's going to make the prisoners not go back to prison? Because you don't have to say that you've been arrested. They don't have that box anymore. But the loophole for that is the background check. So when they do the background check and they check the background and see that you're a felon, they just say, oh, no, we're not going to go that route. And that's their own discretion. They don't have to. They don't have to give you a reason. So it keeps you from getting a good job. Me, I worked in corporate pretty much my entire adult life. I have a felony now, and I've had literally 8 job offerings. I was supposed to start working for the NBA this past Monday that just passed. I got there and they told me, oh, no, we can't use you. You have a criminal background. 8 different times I've had this happen where I had a start date, starting salary, everything. And the moment the background check comes, they're like, nope, you can't do it. I'm sorry. So imagine if you got a guy that's in a job, gives us 2 weeks notice because now he thinks he's going to get this great job, and they pull that kind of crap on him. What's he going to do? Most guys revert back to what they know. You know what? I'm getting $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month. I can go on the street and get that in 2 days. I'm going back to the street. So that's what we end up doing. So it's a revolving door. Because you won't allow them to get a good job that they can be content. Not satisfied, but content with what they're making. So if I don't have any contention, what am I going to do? I'm going to go and make my own contention. How am I going to do that? I'm going to go back to what I know. And what I know usually gets me in trouble.
We have 3 children, and when I left them, right, because that's what I did, I left them, my incarceration affected them drastically. They was raised without a father. I was unable to participate in any school activities that they were in. I didn't get a chance to play part in any of their upbringing because, I learned that a father is a very intricate component of a parenthood. So that impacted them drastically. Right now, one of my children, we're still going through it. We're wrestling with the fact that I'm back now and I'm trying to, position myself in her life, and just try to be a father to her today, which is very difficult because it's a 27-year gap that is between her and I. Two of my children, they're a little bit more understanding in terms of my situation. But God be the glory, I'm still working on it, I ain't giving up. And I really feel bad that I left them. Although I went to prison for something I didn't do, I'm not sitting here telling you I was an angel. My lifestyle dictated that I would go to prison. And that day when I went, my children was affected by that as well. I realized that today, and I really regret that.
That's the problem. It's disproportionate to the problems that we have in society. We have untold numbers of people who are serving ridiculously long sentences for non-violent crimes or for crimes for which they suffered an addiction or a crime that they committed because it was motivated by an addiction or motivated by say for instance you are being trafficked and someone is trying to rape you and you kill them, right? That person should not be in prison, but we punish those people if most of the time they are black and brown people, unfortunately. So the problem with mass incarceration is there is no distinguishing between those who really deserve to be punished if that's what the system is built for, and I'm not so sure that that's even the reason why we incarcerate people. But yeah, it's a difficult question because built in the question, mass incarceration in and of itself, it's wrong. It's just wrong.
Mass incarceration is a crime in the United States. Mass incarceration is the problem. It's part of the problem, and it's certainly not part of the solution in reducing crime. And I think the numbers bear that out because you're taking away men from their families. You're taking away people who could be productive citizens, productive members of society, to stretches of time in their life when they can be earning, when their families need them.
Yeah, that's the thing about having a criminal record or having one arrest. It tarnishes your life. When you go to get a job, it comes up. So this system really is in place to disempower our people. It disempowers our people. The corruption is unprecedented. It's already been exposed, and anyone that would dare speak out about it is punished. The guy who filmed the Eric Garner video, he's being punished right now.
We are on Baruch and Houston. Ramsey has just been arrested for standing off of the sidewalk while filming. The police arrest someone else.
My main goal is to put pressure on cops. Once they see a camera in somebody's hand or a phone in somebody's hand, like they quick to think twice, like, oh shit, I can't do what I wanted to do. But together I have 5 bail bonds. Are exposed literally the modern day lynching. That's what happened. They choked him to death. I don't regret it, but I don't want to be dealing with this. I'm about to go give up some time for my life for taking the video. It's gonna be a rough ride.
It can be considered hypocrisy on certain levels. You might think that those same folks who are being incarcerated, some people tend to think that the system was never set up for them to succeed in any event. So when you say the land of the free, that needs to be qualified, because there are some people who could be considered free here, but at the same time, those are not the people that are going, they're being incarcerated like such immense numbers.
To work in prison, I know we have a system set up, when you first come through any jail, you're required to either go after education or some type of program or some type of job. I think the job requirements are mainly, whoever your needs are at that time when you first come to the jail. And if I may, I just like to add that I don't really like to use the word inmate. I think the new terminology would be someone who's currently incarcerated. Like for me, although I have a prison experience, I'm someone who's formerly incarcerated, because at the end of the day, I'm still a person.
Companies like Victoria's Secret, Whole Foods, and Starbucks have used prison labor. Paul Wright exposed those stories. What percentage of prison labor is corporate America?
It's actually pretty small. And I think that, this may be bad for your story, but the reality is that at any given time, there's around 5,000 to 6,000 prisoners employed by the private sector in this country.
But the truth is, most prisoners aren't working for private companies. They work for the government. Cheap labor keeps the prison system running.
So, what are they doing?
They're doing, primarily what prisoners do is they run the prisons. So anything that has to get done in a prison, unless it's security related, usually prisoners are doing it. So they're doing plumbing, they're doing maintenance, they're doing custodial and janitor services, cleaning, they're cooking food, they're serving food. Literally anything you can think of that is needed to run a prison, prisoners do.
So the prison saves a fortune by making the prisoners run the prison.
Millions, tens of millions, yeah.
They save tens of millions.
There was a GAO report in 1993 that said it would cost prisons hundreds of millions of dollars more each year to pay prisoners minimum wage for the work that they did. So prisons are saving hundreds of millions of dollars by employing prisoners. And when we crunched the numbers, we found that the median wage in state prisons was 20 cents an hour. And the median wage in federal prison was 31 cents an hour. And in a number of states, they don't pay anything at all. Yeah, oh yeah. In Texas, Georgia, Arkansas, and Alabama, prisoners are not paid for their work at all.
I was in Kansas, and I'll never forget one of the assignments that I was put on was working on a horse farm. And they had acres and acres of land. And they had this big truck that would scoop the grass into the front. And in the back, it would kick out a bale of hay. And we had, there were like 6 of us. It was like 4 dudes on the truck and 2 dudes walking behind the truck. And we would literally have to pick up the bale of hay and stack it on the truck. And they would stack the hay this high. And they sold that hay to different farms and different horse farms around the state. Like upstate New York, there's a lot of horse farms, you know? So it felt like I was in groups or something like that. It was crazy because here I am baling hay in a freaking horse farm in upstate New York. Like, it was crazy. We didn't have no shirt on. It was wild. And I like being outside, so I may have even asked for the horse farm. I don't even remember. But yeah, we used to bale hay, man. And we got paid for that. We did get paid for baling hay in Cacsac. You know, 16, 17, 18 years old was baling hay in Cacsac for like 12 cents a day. And selling hay to that's
peonage, which is essentially debt slavery, where a person is held against their will to work off an alleged debt to a landowner or to someone who has purchased them, essentially, and that's the language that was used, buying and selling. Someone who's been purchased from a county jail or purchased from a state prison system, and that's what had happened to Green Cottonham. He was arrested on a charge of vagrancy. He couldn't prove that he had a job in 1908. He couldn't pay the enormous fines. It was essentially 2 years' labor was the fine for vagrancy. He was immediately sold to a coal mine on the outskirts of Birmingham to a company that was then going to pay his fines off 1 month at a time. But instead, 5 months later, he died under horrible conditions in a coal mine outside of Birmingham owned by U.S. Steel Corporation.
Usually in the prison system, because of the 13th Amendment, you are allowed to be paid as a peon, basically. Peonage. 25 cents an hour, 40 cents an hour, 60 cents an hour, whatever it is, depending on the type of work that you are able to get in the facility. But the 13th Amendment's exception clause allows for indentured servitude. It also says expressly that there shall be no slavery or indentured servitude unless you are convicted of a crime. And so everyone who is convicted of a crime in the United States under our laws, under our federal constitution, it's lawful for you to be treated like a slave. Go on indentured servant. Neither is better than the other.
Here, many of the prisoners are enrolled in a prison labor program where the inmates work for far below minimum wage. Some people see these programs as a good thing, training inmates for skills they can use when they're released, while others see it as modern-day slavery.
I'm going to say 0%. I'm going to say 0%. Without having done a whole lot of research on courtcraft, that is a profit-making industry and business, and they are not looking to reinvest in inmates in any way that will help them outside. Now, they might gain some sort of trade experience as a result of the work that they do there, but it's not as if Courtcraft is setting up, that I'm aware of, is setting up some type of help them find jobs when they get out within that field that they were trained for in the prison. I don't think any part of that. I mean, we live in a capitalist society. At the end of the day, it's always about the money. It's always about this country. It's always about the money.
We're saving a lot of money. We're using the materials. The labor is very cost competitive. So we are saving, at the end of the day, taxpayer dollars. Our purpose as the director is to ensure that our inmates are given a skill set. They receive training, not only education, but a skill set. So when they leave the system, that hopefully they could go get a job and not be a repeat offender, and thus reduce recidivism. And that's my goal as the director for the Department of Corrections.
Slavery was about money. It was about money, right? Subjugate and discriminate, all of that was about money. Money and power, because money in this country equates with power, right? So that's always the case. That's always the case. It's always about money. So I don't think that they are required to give back. I mean, that they're a private company. I don't know that they're required to give back anything to the inmates, because I certainly don't think that they do. I mean, if they cared about giving back to the inmate, then they would pay them a living wage, or pay them a decent wage, at least something that they could send back to their family. But they get in commissary money, if that, so they could get some cupcakes in the boss. So, if that.
Well, for me, I never took on one of them type of jobs. As I just mentioned, I always looked at that as a slave shop, and the slave labor, they're using our labor, to build up their economy. So I never went into that area. But I know there was many other individuals who did venture off into that area, because they felt at the time it paid a little bit more than other jobs. For instance, in certain shops, they may give you $35 every 2 weeks. In prison, so to speak, that's a decent amount of money to have to make a commissary buy. It was very difficult. I mean, there was times that I was unable to make, a commissary buy. A lot of times we get help, from over the wall. What I mean by that is, we reach over the wall and we ask our loved ones to send us, some of the things we need, like food or some money to supplement the income that we're receiving. But it's very hard. They pay you slave wages inside the prison. It's not really worth it for the work you do. We call it slave wages. So it's very hard.
This was repealed November 3rd, 1926. My father was alive. Section 6 said if any free Negro mulatto shall fail to quit the country as required by this act, if guilty upon trial, shall receive upon his or her back not less than 20, no more than 39. We'll beat you. That if any free Negro mulatto shall fail to quit the country within the term of 6 months after receiving such stripes, he or she shall again receive the same punishment once every 6 months until he or she shall quit the country. We're going to beat you till you leave. But you're free. The playing field is leveled. Pull yourself up from your bootstraps. Are you following me? So he went back to the plantation. Let's go back. He went back to the plantation to be a sharecropper because that's the only place he could live. But he can't read or write because it was illegal to educate a slave. So I'm illiterate. I go back and I say to the slave owner, past slave owner, okay, now I'm coming back to work for a fair wage because I'm free. And the slave owner says, sure, you can come back. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to advance you seed, tools, and a mule. In other words, I am going to give you that grant that you want. And we're going to let you work with that. And at the end of the year, we'll settle up. Well, the grant's never enough, is it? And so at the end of the year, he's found owing. And what must he do to pay off that debt? He's got to work it off, yes? And his children have to work it off, yes? That's called debt servitude, or another form of slavery. But you all are free. What are you whining about? Let's move forward. So, can we lease them? Now, everybody wants to know big issue. You have overrepresentation here. Guess how I know? Overrepresentation in the criminal justice system has its etiology. It was big business then. It's big business now. You're going to get free labor one way or another. New slavery is imprisonment. Well, let's see. Why was this? It was so successful. By the mid-1898, nearly 3/4 of Alabama's total state revenue came directly from this institution. Well, of course, I wanted to do research on what they did, because they're free. But now we're arresting them at alarming rates. And for what? 12 years for vagrancy, loitering, startling a white woman, looking menacingly at a white woman. That's what they got 10, 12, 15 years for. And many of them, 25%, died under convict lease, more than during slavery, because there were no protections, because now we have another label to justify our behavior towards them. And what's their new label? Well, after all, they're convicts. They're criminals. Don't they deserve it? Do you see what I'm saying? So when did it end, is the question.
With respect to this system has been in place in terms of the cash bond system, where it has caused division amongst, it's sort of like the have and the have-nots. You know, many people that come from the communities of color, low socioeconomic classes and statuses, they are unable to afford bail. And as a result of being unable to afford bail, and dare I say unable to afford proper representation, folks are often incarcerated for months, years, without any kind of real recourse, because they lack the funds and the income to really fight or buy their own freedom.
Well, I think that there's been a strong movement for criminal justice reform, and one of the things that finally people are paying attention to is bail. And I think that might be as a result of Khalif Browder in his case, in which he couldn't make a meager bail. I think his bail was $3,000. And he refused to plead guilty because he said he didn't do it. And unfortunately, he stayed in prison because he wouldn't take the deal. I'm glad that there is criminal justice reform, particularly in New York. There are new laws that will be effective in 2020 that will allow for judges to release people who are accused of nonviolent offenses or misdemeanors without bail. Okay, without bail. So we are moving towards a system in which we do not criminalize poverty, and I'm happy about that. It needs to go a little further, because even though you may be out, you still may not be able to get adequate representation. And I think part of the problem is that those people who provide services for indigent defendants are not adequately compensated, they're not adequately trained, and they're not adequately staffed. Okay, and so even if you get out, right, so you don't have a bail or you make bail, you might still avail yourself of a plea deal, because one, you don't feel like the lawyer that you've been assigned, because you can't afford an attorney, is working hard enough for you, or is working in your best interest, or you think might be working with the DA. I hear a lot of people think that, they're working with the DA. And so that's part of the problem, right? So we might make some strides there, but we also have to continue to request and require that states, not just the federal government, but that the states provide indigent defendants with competent counsel. Competent counsel, and it's not competent counsel does not mean some guy or woman who's been out of law school for 5 minutes, who's got 500 cases on their desk that they can't possibly manage.
When a defense lawyer doesn't do his or her job, justice suffers, and the defendant may even be wrongfully convicted, in which case the real perpetrator remains undetected. Earl Washington Jr.'s case is just one example of an exoneree wrongly convicted based on inadequate defense lawyering. He was convicted in Virginia after a trial lasting less than 5 hours. His lawyer had never handled a death penalty case before, did not challenge the confession, or hire an expert to develop why Washington confessed due to mental retardation, and called only 2 witnesses in Mr. Washington's defense. Washington would come within 9 days of execution and would spend 22 years in prison before DNA exonerated him. A review of convictions overturned by DNA testing reveals examples of incompetent and overburdened defense attorneys, including those who are sleeping or drunk at the trial level and on appeal. In general, the defense case brought on behalf of these innocent people was short and weak. Because post-conviction DNA testing can only be used in a very small percentage of all criminal cases, the trials of these innocent people represent only the tip of the inadequate defense iceberg.
That's not competent counsel. So we have to do better in that. I think that would reduce some of the plea deals. I think the plea deals will be reduced. We change the law and people are out of prison. Because the problem with those people who cannot get out is that they then will plead guilty to a crime they did not commit just to get out. Just to get out. Take for instance, someone who, say he went to a guy, he has a good job. Say he works at Con Edison, right? Good job. One of these Verizon type jobs, right? Goes out for a cup, has a drink, driving home. He doesn't think he's drunk. He had 2 drinks. He gets pulled over. They tell him to blow. He blows a 0.1. That's not super drunk, but it's over the legal limit. So now you're arrested. Let's say 9 years ago he had a DUI, right? So now you have a felony DUI because within the 10-year period, you caught another DUI. Now you have $5,000 bail, and you don't have $5,000 just laying around, and you can't make bail. So you miss work Monday. You're going to miss work on Tuesday. You're going to miss work on Wednesday. And you probably will lose your job, right? So not only can you not make bail, you now have lost your job. You probably, if you have to stay in prison for any significant period of time, and when I say significant, I'm talking 30 days or more, you might lose your housing. You might lose your housing. Your family, your wife, your girlfriend, she might leave. Right? I'm not doing this with you. No. Right? And so your entire world has fallen apart simply because you don't have the resources to make a bail or hire competent counsel. And you, under the stress of that, might say, I'm going to take a plea. I'm going to take a plea because I need to get out of here. One, I got to go to work. Right? Or I got to take care of this, or I have to take care of that. Or if you have children, right? What about the women who get arrested who have small children? All of these factors come into play. So I'm really glad that there is a push for criminal justice reform, and that we will see more and more states enacting legislation that doesn't require bail for anyone who is charged with a non-violent crime or a low-level misdemeanor. I think that would do wonders for many, many defendants, and it will keep them from pleading guilty just to get out.
Mass incarceration means that we've got a very high rate of incarceration historically, comparatively. And the other thing is the rate of incarceration is so high, so socially concentrated, that we're no longer incarcerating the individual, but we're incarcerating whole social groups. The rate of incarceration now is about 5 times higher than it was historically. Historically, it was 100 per 100,000. Now it's about 500 per 100,000. If we look at prison, if we add jail to that, it's about 700 per 100,000. Nowhere in the world incarcerates as much as we do. We've seen extremely high rates of exposure to the criminal justice system for African American men with very low levels of schooling. So if we think about black men who were born in the late 1970s and who were growing up through the American prison boom of the 1980s and the 1990s, the chances that they're going to serve time in state or federal prison if they dropped out of high school is about 70%. So going to prison for that group of black men with very low levels of schooling, that's become a normal life event. And that's really only happened in the last 10 years. We're at this point now where there's about 1.2 million African American children with a parent who's incarcerated. That's about 1 in 9. The research shows that kids who experience parental incarceration have diminished school achievement, they have behavioral problems, depressive symptoms, acting out. And there's also evidence that these kinds of negative effects associated with parental incarceration are concentrated more among boys than among girls. And there's a very real risk here that incarceration becomes an inherited trait. The underlying issue is we've chosen prison as a way to respond to that problem of crime. And there are a whole variety of ways that we could have chosen to respond to that problem of crime. We've chosen the response of the deprivation of liberty. And we've chosen the response of the deprivation of liberty for a historically aggrieved group whose liberty in the United States was never firmly established to begin with.
Now, I have a number of cases that come to mind, but one in particular is an older gentleman. He's about 50 years old, never been incarcerated a day in his life. So there was a scenario where he was, taking care of his family. He got with a woman. They were in a serious relationship. She had 3 children with him. They had 3 children together, and he moved her into his apartment. So this was an apartment that was left to him. So as a result of moving him into the apartment, he's taking care of his family. The woman went to public assistance and essentially got on child support. So while she was living with him, she got on child support. And he was like, why am I paying child support for a family that I'm taking care of? So he went to court, and the judge ruled the woman was committing fraud. So she advised the woman to go back to public assistance and tell them that, you're doing something wrong. This was fraud, so on and so forth. So rather than do that, the woman filed charges and said he assaulted her. And basically, he was arrested for assault. And what I say, his life was negatively impacted because he had never been arrested before. And he went to Rikers Island. And for those of us who aren't aware of Rikers Island can be a very, very unfortunate place to be. The human trauma that goes on in that island is very devastating. So this individual was being violated, and a number of things happened to him as a result of being incarcerated. So rather than fight the case, which there was no evidence that he did anything, that he assaulted her. Rather than fight the case, he essentially took a plea for assault, and just to get off Rikers Island. And I think that, and I say his life was negatively impacted because this is an individual who had never committed a crime and was actually doing something to support his family. But as a result of, this unfortunate occurrence, he could not afford bail. He could not get off Rikers Island, and he wanted to go back home to his family. He essentially took a plea bargain, which now is forever instilled on his record.
And I'm going to tell you another secret. The system cannot handle people going to trial. If everyone said, I'm not taking a plea, I'm not taking a deal, the whole system would collapse. Over 90% of the people that are charged with crimes take a plea. Don't plead. Don't plead. Watch those buildings crumble. They cannot facilitate the trials that would be required. They couldn't do it. They don't have the manpower for it. That's why the plea rate is so high, because that's what makes this system function. So we need to stop doing that. And part of not doing that is to get people out of jail, get them from under the prison, because that is an impetus for them to plead guilty. They just want to get out, right? And if I've been in for 9 months and the prosecutor comes to me and offers me 9 months, that's time served. I don't care if I didn't do it. I'm getting out of here. I've been here 9 months for something I didn't do. What's the likelihood that I'm going to go to trial and 12 people who don't look like me, who are not peers, might actually believe that I didn't do it?
You have individuals nowadays who, for nonviolent crime, who can't even afford $500, that are forced to languish on Rikers Island and other places as a result of not being able to afford this meager amount that some people would think is peanuts. But then you have the racial disparity amongst the have and the have-nots. So I think this system is a system that has been very devastating, I should say, to black and brown folks. However, in the last couple of months, there is movement in bail reform policy. Mayor de Blasio has been, on the forefront of implementing certain laws that are changing the way bail reform will be applied amongst folks in New York City, in particular, and this will possibly go into effect, I think January of 2020. So I'm looking forward to see how these laws will positively impact folks who come from my community, among other laws, such as the First Step Act, such as Raise the Age, where, young folks were forced to be on Rikers Island and in situations where, they could have possibly been provided with a program. And I'm looking forward to this.